Strictly speaking, Stoics ought not to hate impressions. In theory, they admit that some impressions are true, some even, according to Chrysippus and his more careful followers, are cataleptic. That is, they have the kind of self-evidence that displays their inability to be false, and without those impressions it is doubtful that there could ever be knowledge. But this is theory, not common practice. In practice, Stoics are frequently overtly hostile to impressions or, as the passages from Marcus Aurelius recently introduced by Dave Kelly display, hypolepsias. A term which is occasionally translated as suppositions or assumptions, but which a few translators render judgments. Marcus approving citation at Meditations 4:3. Of the Pythagorean philosopher Democritus to the effect that ho bios, hypolepsis, life is judgment, is almost equivalent to life is vanity. Put this in the context suggested by 12:25, overboard with judgment. Technically, a judgment is an impression to which we have assented. Marcus seems to focus so much on wrong assent that he calls for throwing out all judgments and impressions. Of course, it is hardly kosher for Stoics to hate anything, hate officially being a passion, and all passions officially being bad. But the emotional investment that Marcus puts into his meditations and the emotional investment of his devoted interpreters are unmistakable. Why does this occur? It occurs because the Stoics make use of a more or less coherent set of metaphors associated with what some cognitive scientists call the strict father-family model, which is fully alive in our own time. The SFF model is projected onto national politics and takes the general shape of conservative policy preferences. It is projected onto humanity or reality as a whole and takes the general shape of conservative or even fundamentalist forms of faith, or traditional sorts of philosophy. In fact, the philosophical mainstream is so pervaded by SFF assumptions that it is difficult for most philosophers to notice. It is the air they seem to have always breathed. Fortunately, anyone wishing to do an analysis of Stoicism from this perspective does not have to begin from nothing. An analysis of Kant has already been done, in George Lakoff's and Mark Johnson's Philosophy in the Flesh, Chapter 20. And there are sufficient parallels between Kant and Stoicism, a parallelism that has often been noted, that we can use their analysis of Kant, with occasional modifications, to shed light on the cognitive unconscious of Stoicism. I have already made initial forays into this area. 2 of them are available at the Stoic Place website. Metaphorical Structure of Epictetus Enchiridion 1 and Stoic Ethics and Family-Based Moralities. Today I'm going to discuss only one additional aspect, and try to make sense of what would otherwise be an irrational hatred of impressions and judgments. Now, as LJ show in the case of Kant, Kant treats the mind metaphorically as a community consisting of various faculties metaphorically understood as persons or, in the case of the inclinations, animals or forces of nature. This community of the mind metaphor is a part of general culture during the Enlightenment. Reason is conceptualized as the strict father, who is the moral authority. Impure reason, which would be reason under the influence of the inclinations, would be a failure as a parent, according to this model. The will, which the Judeo-Christian tradition typically distinguishes from reason, insofar as it can act according to reason or right belief or not, is metaphorically conceived as the child, who ought to follow reason. I maintain that the community of the mind metaphor, in some form or other, is much older than the Enlightenment. It goes back to the ancient Greeks. In the Stoic case, divine reason, or the reason of sages that fully comply with it, is the strict father and the moral authority.